All right, wonderful. So let's go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sada Abdelaziz, and I'm here on behalf of Abolitionist Teaching Network, the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP. All right, wonderful. The Southern Center for Human Rights. Sorry, I can hear a little bit of feedback. One second. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. Ooh. Okay, that's better. All right, so like I was saying, my name is Sada Abdelaziz, and I'm here on behalf of Abolitionist Teaching Network, and the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP, the Southern Center for Human Rights, and Abolitionist Teaching Network is calling for this virtual press conference alongside other concerned activists in light of the latest court proceeding called for by Judge Jerry Baxter. That court proceeding will be taking place tomorrow. And it has to do with the ongoing Atlanta public school cheating scandal. So we'll be having comments from some community advocates, and then we'll open up the floor to press from questions. And y'all can feel free to type in your questions already in the chat, and we'll get to them after the comment. So tomorrow, the attorney representing the remaining 6 defendants in the case, Stephen Scarborough, will appear before Judge Jerry Baxter. It appears that the focus of Thursday's hearing is a motion to withdraw representation filed by Stephen Scarborough. He maintains that it's a conflict of interest to represent multiple defendants in the same case. The State Bar of Georgia concurred with his position in 2019, but Judge Jerry Baxter denied the motion. So we're not sure what course Judge Jerry Baxter is going to take tomorrow, but it is as evident to us today as it was almost exactly a year ago when the last hearing around this case was set to take place, as it was nearly 10 years ago when the first indictments of Georgia public school educators began. The Atlanta public school cheating scandal must come to an end. 2023 marks a decade of legal proceedings. We have seen 2 educators go to prison, hundreds of community service hours earned, and thousands of dollars go to legal costs. And that doesn't even begin to detail the burden on Georgia taxpayers. The title of longest and most expensive criminal trial in Georgia history has been earned. And yet we believe that not a single child in the public school system of Atlanta or Georgia has benefited from these legal actions. We as Georgia residents, human rights groups, community advocates, and organizations dedicated to advancing the ideal of public education are calling upon Judge Jerry Baxter to take the opportunity of tomorrow's court date to finally close this ugly and draining chapter of our history. No educator should go to prison over a test. No lawyer should be forced into a conflict of interest to represent them. We're tired, and the people of Atlanta and of Georgia are tired. And if we do really want to fix public education, let's move forward with the task of fixing it, rather than doubling down on a wrong that cannot be righted through this course of action. Judge Jerry Baxter has the power to draw this to a close. And we implore you, please use that power. Thank you. So I'll hand it off now to Mr. Griggs of the NAACP, followed by Dr. Marquita Blades, Mr. James Woodall, Reverend Timothy McDonald, Bishop Darius Ashlock Sr., and we'll close out with President Richard Rose.
And thank you. I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs, President of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP, and former attorney for Angela Williamson in Georgia's longest trial, the Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal trial, where I also represented several other defendants who were not charged. And what I can say about this particular chapter in American history and in Georgia history It was the most unnecessary trial that I've ever seen. 8 months of witnesses, hundreds and hundreds of documents, thousands of court hours where no child was remediated was a waste of time. And so to still almost 10 years later, be still talking, litigating this issue, it's time for us to close the chapter on this ugly part of Atlanta's history. We need to move forward. The 6 defendants that are left, I believe, have done substantially enough to end this particular saga. And so, you know, as my position with the NAACP, we've always stood with these teachers through the Atlanta chapter and through many of the other units in support of their civil rights. And I think that hopefully tomorrow, Judge Baxter will see light at the end of the tunnel, that the end come for this. Again, no child was remediated. No good came of this trial. Individuals died because of this trial, during the trial, and even after the trial. And it was a colossal waste of time and taxpayer money. So for those reasons, as well as the fact that the 6 educators who are still left standing were fine, upstanding members of the community. None of them had any criminal history before this and have not had any criminal history after this. The 2 educators that did go to prison have now served their time and are back being productive citizens in our community, one of which is back teaching, and her record has been cleared. So if the goal was to fix the system is still operating in the same capacity that it did before. I saw some test results recently from the Atlanta Public Schools, this school district, that were very disturbing. Students reading under the basic baseline with ELA and math. And so my question, having sat through the trial, having heard the verdict, which still shocks my conscience even today, that on April Fool's Day 2015, educators were found guilty of changing wrong to right answers for the purpose of financial gain, when there was absolutely no financial gain by the individuals that were actually on trial. It's shocking that we're even having to come before the media and the world to demand actual closure to this case and actual justice. But what I would ask the judge, as humbly as I know how, to end this, to allow the educators who are still facing these charges with these prison sentences leniency and clemency, and dismiss this case. And so we can move on to the actual work of taking care of the education of our young people and moving forward as a community. So I, Gerald Griggs, respectfully ask for Judge Jerry Baxter to see leniency and to see justice and dismiss this case.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Marquita Blades. I am the owner of Dr. Blades Consulting. I'm an education consultant and a former public school educator for 16 years. I did teach for 1 school year in the Atlanta public school system. And I am here today, just as I was last year, almost a year to the date, as Sada mentioned, in support of the remaining 6 educators that were involved in this APS cheating trial that, again, as has been already said, is going into a decade that this case has been open and active. I am standing once again in solidarity with the Abolitionist Teaching Network, the NAACP, and all other supporting organizations in asking that Judge Jerry Baxter agree to a resolution to this case that spares the remaining 6 educators from prison time and or probation. So much time has passed while this case is going on. I was actually still a classroom teacher at the time that this case was filed and at the time that educators went on trial. Since that time, I have left the public school arena, have worked with educators all around the country as a consultant, and I have yet to see anything that has happened to directly benefit those students who were impacted at that time, or any successive students who have come through the Atlanta public school system or any other school system in Georgia or nationwide. I don't even see where this case is being used as a precedent for the argument to completely revamp the way that we assess student learning, the way that we set standards for student learning, the equitable practices or the lack thereof in the testing system in general. In addition to that, educators have served their time. They have done community service. Some have served time behind prison bars. Most educators lost their licenses, and most of them did not recover them, although there are maybe a couple of anomalies. Families have suffered. Family structure has declined. People's images in the community are not what they used to be. Being an educator, despite all of the challenges that we have in the field, is still one of the most noble professions that any person could enter into. And so the stain that this is leaving on people's professional and public image is one that cannot be easily repaired. We also have to think about the mental health issues that all of the educators involved in this trial have suffered. And we also have to, I also want to point out that it has been documented that at least one of the co-defendants in this case contemplated suicide at one point. I will also say that the millions of dollars that have been spent on this case over the years could have easily been diverted into actually reconstructing our education system and testing in particular. We are facing incredible issues across the field, one of those being recruiting and retaining top talent into the field. And when we see something like this continuing on for nearly a decade, it does discourage any future educators from entering this field, in addition to increasing amounts of school violence, low teacher morale, and the tons of other issues that educators face. It is simply time that we divert our attention and resources into true education reform, and that we resolve this case immediately. So I formally and respectfully stand in agreement with the other stakeholders who are on this call today, requesting that Judge Jerry Baxter spare these educators from any prison time, any probation time, that they are granted full clemency, and that this case be resolved immediately. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is James Major Woodall, and I'm a policy associate at the Southern Center for Human Rights, and we stand in full support of that lifted up here today. We at the Southern Center believe that the overuse of prisons, jails, and other forms of correctional control as tools to address broader societal issues is a failed American experiment. The harm that is inflicted by mass incarceration cannot be overstated, and this case is a prime example of why that should never be the case. Our work to reduce mass incarceration takes on many of its primary drivers, and one of the issues in this particular case is the use of the RICO statute to prosecute these teachers. And so we, again, stand in full support and solidarity with those teachers to ensure that mass incarceration does not continue, both in this matter and much more broader. And we ask that Judge Baxter also considers the calls and the claims that have been raised here today and have been raised for nearly 10 years, that this should not be happening here in our home state, in our home city, and in our own community. And so we believe that there's other ways that we can address the issues that have been raised in this case. And in fact, over the last several years, that has been a priority of not just Southern Center, but all the partners of this movement. And we'll continue that work to reducing mass incarceration, as well as ensuring that our students, our young people, have all of the resources that they need to be successful. But what we do know is mass incarceration in prison is not making communities safer, nor are they making it better. In fact, in many ways, it's making it very much so worse. And so we're asking that you keep communities together, that you keep individuals with their families, that you keep doing all that we can do to build a more just system. Again, thank you. I'm James Woodall from the Southern Center for Human Rights, and we look forward to continuing to stand with both the teachers and the community at large.
I'm Reverend Tim McDonald, pastor of the First Iconium Baptist Church here in Atlanta, past president of Concerned Black Clergy of Atlanta, which is Black and white clergy working on behalf of the community. And I'm also the past full-time assistant pastor of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where I learned a lot about conflict and conflict resolution. Daddy King was still alive at the time that I served there for 6 years. I learned a lot about love and about forgiveness and about grace. My background, as you see, is my pulpit. It's a photo, but I like to remind people that I am a person of faith. What we see going on now with our educators is not a new chapter. My daughter, who was graduating from Valdosta State, being a certified educator at the time, 10 years ago, when these trials were going on, called me and said, "Dad, I can't teach." I was very hurt because of what's happening in Atlanta. People don't like teachers. Teachers are being put in a negative light. And I know that that's something I've said I've always wanted to do, but I can't teach. And I wanted you to know that. My heart was broken. I said, well, get your degree and we'll deal with it. We got her a job in DeKalb County. I knew her heart was in teaching. She knew her heart was in teaching. She loved teachers. She loved students. She loved working with parents. It took us 7 years to get her where she would go into teaching, the field that she loved and wanted to be in. She's now a very successful teacher in Henry County, teaching the first grades, very loved by her students, very loved by her parents, her staff, her co-workers. Education is one of the most important professions in our society. I was very hurt during the Atlanta cheating scandal. I never felt that teachers should have been persecuted because of even the accusations. The truth of the matter is, Atlanta Public School has still produced, in the last 10 years, in the last 9 years, doctors, lawyers, judges, preachers, entrepreneurs. The students have still excelled. The students have still made our society a better place. I don't see where the persecuting of these educators has changed anything in our society. So we would ask Judge Baxter to show some grace, to show some mercy, and to move our city, allow our city to move forward, allow these educators to move on with their lives. Because I am a person of faith, Concerned Black Clergy was there. We had to counsel with a number of these defendants. We talked with them. We met their families. We met their newborns, and they're trying their best to move on with their lives. It's time to end this madness. It has not helped our city. It has not helped our school. It has not helped public education. It's time to close this chapter and allow these educators to move on with their lives. Let's address the real issues that we're facing in education. And I think Judge Baxter has an opportunity, as Spike Lee says, to just do the right thing, to just do the right thing. 10 years is a long time. Let us continue to produce great graduates from Atlanta Public School system. Let us continue to produce, people who go to to further themselves in education, to get degrees, to become inventors and scientists and mathematicians and lawyers and judges themselves and preachers and teachers. Let's continue to move Atlanta public school system in the right direction, and continuing to prosecute these 6 educators would be a move in the wrong direction. It is time to end this madness, and we ask Judge Baxter to do the right thing, to allow these educators who have already paid a huge debt. I mean, we counsel with them. We're still in communication with some of them, and it is time. And so we would ask the judge to consider grace, consider mercy, to do the right thing, and to allow these 6 remaining defendants to, having served, having done what they needed to do in community service, to be allowed to move on with their lives. I think the judge has the courage to do that. I believe Judge Baxter will do that. That's going to be our prayer. And I look forward to celebrating what grace and mercy and people of goodwill and faith would do to further the state of Georgia's educators.
My name is Bishop Darius Ashlock, Senior with the National Action Network for DeKalb County. Judge Baxter has a lot of power, a lot of influence. He's a great man. He's done a lot of great things. I think that fixing this problem would be the greatest thing he's done in his career. I think that if he would allow the reality of what damage has been done to the Atlanta public school system, the pain and suffering, the tyranny that has occurred from this case, if he just calculate how many hearts and how many families have been destroyed, literally annihilated, the pain of our communities, the fear that's been created in the education system for new, possible, hopeful individuals and teachers, individuals that seek to be teachers, lingering like a dark cloud over our education system. Looking into that, I'm sure in his career, he would recognize that it would be a great thing to dismiss this case completely, resolving all individuals of any charges, and allow healing to take place in the communities. Healing is needed in the Atlanta public school system and Atlanta in general. We need the leadership of this court to respect the fact that as these individuals on this meeting today are requesting one simple thing, and it pains me to have this conversation. It's very painful to hear this. It's painful to know that the individuals I know personally that were damaged by this case, at the time we had a thriving school program in our ministry, and you can hear my voice. I'm not able to manage this. This is it's bringing up a lot of pain for me. I consider myself a pretty strong individual, but this is a painful conversation. To know that these teachers were just annihilated and chosen to be the victims of something as sinister as what was accused in the cases, in this case, what they were accused of, excuse me. It absolutely makes no sense to me. It makes no sense because our communities have monitored our kids, their progress for so many decades, and for 10 years to be a continued conversation of a court case that should have never occurred in the Atlanta public school system, where there was so much more need for resources and tools and opportunities for these kids. That was the need. Not prosecuting teachers, that's not the need. I asked for Judge Baxter to create the healing opportunity that this could be the benefit, that the benefit from this case could be that he wants to see healing by releasing the last 6 defendants, by allowing this case to end, by allowing some other resources to be the conversation. And that's the point that matters most, that we want healing to take place from this situation. The fact that individuals lost their lives, their livelihoods, all the other damages, psychological damages that were a reflection of this case. The individuals that I know, young students that wanted to be teachers, as Rem was saying, they just felt they felt like this would be painful to consider, that they would be a victim of some sort. Some kids even said to me that they felt like this was more discrimination, that a bunch of black students, black teachers, excuse me, were being used as a tool for some other heinous act that we'll never know about. I don't know the reality of that, but I do know this: it's healing time in this country. We have too much going on. None of it's really benefiting any of us. And I pray that Judge Baxter would allow healing to happen by releasing and dismissing this case. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Richard Rose, president of the Atlanta NACP. Founded in 1917, full 7 years before the first public high school in Georgia was open for African Americans. We have been in, our mission objectives have not changed: equal justice, education, economic opportunity, and voting rights. We have been immersed in the advocacy for education from the outset, as we continue to be. Like the others on this panel, I asked Judge Baxter to show mercy, grace and mercy. These 6 educators have been severely punished. They've lost their fortune, they've lost their professions, they've lost their standing in the community. They've lost, and none of this loss has inured to the benefit of the students, who should be the focus. What is better for the focus for the students? From the outset, this has been a situation that begs for justice. How could the Atlanta School Board create a compensation package for the superintendent that required action by the teachers? Superintendent is, in terms of primary educational motivators, the superintendent is not even on the list. Teachers are 3rd or 4th, depending on what survey you look at. And so the whole analysis, the whole premise of the contract that would put such pressure on those who are at the bottom of the totem pole begs for justice itself. Again, these teachers have lost their profession, they've lost their reputation, they've lost their standing, they've lost their income, they lost, many of them lost their fortune in terms of legal fees. It is time to focus again on what is just and what is appropriate in the circumstances, not necessarily by a win or a loss for the prosecutor. I mean, in this case, there was a teacher prosecuted whose students never even took a test, yet she was embroiled in this case. We ask for justice from Judge Baxter as you weigh the entirety of this case, not just a few things, not just maybe the law, but the entirety. Where is justice? The Atlanta NACP, as we've continued since, as I mentioned, since 1917, advocate for education of all people, in particular those of former enslaved, the ancestors of formerly enslaved individuals based on race. Each of these, we should not be lost, that each of these educators is African American. Here's Atlanta, where a few scant months after the Civil War was ended, education began at the Atlanta University Center. Education is a way out, and let us focus on education. What is best for these students? How this focuses on what the school board. We should not be victimized. The teachers should not be victimized from decisions that were made so far above them that they were barely informed of these decisions and how they affected their lives. Again, we ask Judge Baxter to show grace and mercy. The Atlanta NAACP stands forthwith with these students, these teachers, and this system. We want to make sure that everybody has learned from all of this so that the focus is on each student, not as a group, not as data, not as a number, but every student, what is best for that student to be able to achieve educationally and be prepared to be citizens to produce in the future to make Atlanta and Georgia and America a better place. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. We are opening up the floor for any journalists, any media folks who have any questions. You can feel free to type it, but you can also raise your hands and I can unmute you and you can ask us any questions that you might have at this time. So we have one question right now. I'll address this and we can see who wants to answer it. Hello, Anna Simonton from the Appeal. District Attorney Fonnie Willis, who was one of the lead prosecutors on this case before becoming DA, has indicated that her stance hasn't changed. Do you have comments on the role that her office should play in order to resolve this case? Any folks want to take that question?
I can take that question. And, you know, DA Willis, it's not surprised me that her position hasn't changed. What I would just ask respectfully to her is what students have been remediated and what has been done to move the conversation forward for the students. Because again, from the very beginning, the DA's office said this was about providing opportunity to remediate the students. And so if we're still talking about punishment without reconciliation and remediation, what is the point of the punishment? And so my question would be to her as the lead prosecutor in this case, what have you done to remediate the alleged damage that was supposedly done by these teachers? Or are you finally conceding that there was no damage done, thus no need for remediation and also no need for punishment?
Okay.
I would say to DA Willis that, again, this ought to be about justice. And we know in America, justice is for sale. People with resources are treated differently under this justice system. And we ought to be looking, we understand that. And these 6 individuals did not have the benefit of resources in order to mount the kind of defense like as others did. And so at this point, as Gerald Griggs has said, you know, where's the remediation? What is the purpose? What is the objective here? And has the objective been served? I would say so. They have been punished, their reputations are lost, they've lost their professions. It is time for us to move on from this sordid chapter in Atlanta's public schools history and again focus on what we will do today and tomorrow for these students.
I have Dr. Mark. Love to close that.
Yes, I did.
Following question.
Yes, I just wanted to add a comment that is more of a question along the same lines as Attorney Griggs. And I would like to know how, if in any way, testing procedures in Atlanta public schools have changed as a result of this case, if there have been any lessons learned and actually applied, so that the way that we administer testing, security, who has access to those tests, the channels that they go through from the time that they're delivered into the building, then into the hands of students, and then back into the hands of those who have to send them off for scoring. Has any of that changed? And if it hasn't, as a result of this 10-year case, then I would have to ask, what is the point in continuing this case?
Okay, and I'd just love to close this question out and we can move on to the next one by saying also that the truth is that District Attorney Fani Willis is District Attorney Fani Willis because she was lead prosecutor of this case. So her reputation is definitely intent on remaining with the same line that she had at the time. And we're also seeing District Attorney Fani Willis now and this position of power using RICO charges very liberally. She is prosecuting currently the former president with RICO charges. She is prosecuting currently a rap group with RICO charges, and we are seeing the teachers prosecuted with RICO charges. So we're also seeing the way that DA Willis approaches her district attorneyship with sort of a one-size-fits-all RICO charge, even in a case where there was no criminal conspiracy for material gain. So the next question that we have, it looks
Before
like
before you go to that next question, I want to very briefly mention that I think there needs to be a conversation much more deeper than just DA Fani Willis. I think when we think about RICO and we think about any prosecution, it's all based on what's currently in the code. And so there needs to be a conversation about what is provided in Georgia's code as it relates to the RICO statute and how flexible it allows for prosecutors to be able to identify any organization, whether it is a teacher that works in a public school system or even a private school system, or you can have someone working at a bank, or you can have someone even working at a police department. There needs to be a serious conversation about the balance of the law to allow for there to be true accountability while at the same time not invading within one's own discretion as a prosecutor to be able to send people to prison that again adds to mass incarceration. And so we at the Southern Center, we're concerned that not just necessarily this case, but there's a distinct pattern of allowing prosecutors full vantage and full opportunity and full discretion to really do whatever they want without any balance of the law, which would obviously be afforded to the court by way of a judge. And that's actually being erased even as we speak. And so there needs to be a very serious conversation about what is happening within the courtrooms across this state, because this isn't the only case. Even though we're here for this case, this isn't the only case where these kinds of prosecutions are happening, where everyday people are being criminalized and sent to prison and disrupting the flow of our community. And so there's a very serious concern about that as a pattern of practice across the state of Georgia, and we have to continue to lift the alarm and sound the alarm on that very fact. In fact, we have an attorney general who is currently pushing forth new prosecutions under this code section. And so we got to be very intentional about how this is being constructed. And it is not just a Fani Willis problem. This is a problem that we're seeing all throughout the state of Georgia.
Thank you for that. And we're hopeful too, I think probably I speak on behalf of all of us, that District Attorney Fani Willis could do what's right and come out and support resolving this case, could make that decision and be very impactful in doing so. I think we answered the other question in the chat. Do any other folks have questions? Please feel free to raise your hand or type it. We have another one. I'm curious about the allegation made by some defendants that Judge Baxter originally gave the wrong directions to the jury. Any truth to that?
Well, I mean, that was one of the issues raised on appeal and went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. but ultimately the United States Supreme Court did not rule on the merits of the case and sent it back down. But that was an argument raised by many of the defendants on appeal. And hopefully, if Judge Baxter decides to either appoint a new appellate lawyer who can bring that issue back up for all of the defendants, or just dismiss the case. But that was an argument that was raised on appeal that was never reached by the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Mr. Griggs. We're caught up right now with questions, so folks feel free to raise your hands or type any in the chat. We got a question from Tanya Mendoza. Do you concede that wrong was done and children suffered, or do you think this was a case that should have never been prosecuted?
From the evidence that I sat through for 8 months, I don't believe they proved that any children were harmed by the 13 defendants that were on trial. Do I believe that cheating was occurring at Atlanta public schools? Yes, I do believe cheating was occurring. I also believe cheating was occurring around the state of Georgia. The erasure analysis showed that there were other districts that had higher wrong to right erasures, like Augusta, I believe Chatham, and several other counties. But do I believe that this trial was actually about the students and remediation? No, this was a political ploy to get the Opportunity School District to be passed. And that's why they had the crux onto the Atlanta public school system, because the former superintendent would not allow the governor to come in and take over the school system. So I think this was a political trial from the very beginning. I think that no children were remediated, or any of the problems that were alleged were, one, shown by the evidence, or two, fixed afterwards. So I do believe this is a political trial, and I believe that's why there's still the onus to punish at this point.
I do want to say as well, oh, sorry, Reverend, I'll have you go next. The children of Atlanta and of Georgia and of the U.S. public education system have suffered steadily since the advent of standardized testing, since No Child Left Behind, since testing became the way that you measured a child's success and intelligence, and a one-size-stamp-fits-all that has roots in deep racism and eugenics. And that's a fact. So yes, children did suffer, and children are still suffering in the Atlanta public school system. And I think that's what we're all trying to draw attention to, is the wrongs haven't been righted, and this was never the path to right them. So we want the wrongs to be righted. We think children deserve the best public education, children in Atlanta, children in Georgia, and children across this country. So let's actually take the steps that are necessary to give them that, which is to reimagine education beyond standardized testing, and which is to reimagine classrooms that have this level of punishment, surveillance, and carcerality. Reverend McDonald, did you want to say?
Well, you pretty much said what I was about to say about No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind has hurt our educational system probably more than anything, where it made testing itself the focus. And Attorney Griggs is right on target. It was politically motivated. You may recall we had a statewide referendum about the state being able to take over local public schools based on tests. That is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. And we got caught up in it. Atlanta got caught up in it. And we need education reform. What we're doing now with these 6 educators is not going to bring about education reform. I would reiterate again, the same year, we had high school graduates from Atlanta public school system who went on to become doctors and lawyers and judges and mathematicians and inventors and pastors and teachers and educators. The trial did not do anything to help the students at all. And punishing these educators did not do anything to help the system. We got to look at the whole political ramifications of what was going on at that time, what's going on even now, because there's still some political implications going on now. Judge Baxter had to set himself outside of the political arena. Judges and courts ought to be independent of the politics and do the right thing. Do the right thing. These 6 educators have served enough, as has been already stated. They have been hurt and harmed enough. I am a person of faith. I believe in second chances. I believe in redemption. I believe that the judge has the power to move us forward, to move us towards serious education reform by allowing just letting this trial be over with. And let's move toward real education reform, real testing reform, and getting education out of the politics.
Thank you, Reverend McDonald. We have one more question, and we can begin to wrap it up if there are any last questions. But Tanya Mendoza is asking, have all 6 defendants engaged in community service while awaiting appeal? Any folks feel comfortable answering that?
I believe so. I do know that when the 6 were represented by their previous counsel, they were in the process of completing their community service. I know some of them actually started working for civic and social minded institutions to do that work. So I do believe the answer is yes.
And there was one additional defendant as well. It was 7 folks until just a few months ago. And that was Dana Evans, and Judge Jerry Baxter decided to make the right decision. And we're so grateful and thankful for that. And she is not serving prison time. And part of that was the incredible years of community service that Dana Evans had done in her community and how she was still doing that. So if there are no more questions, we'll leave another minute or so for any last lingering questions, and then we can wrap this up. And we thank you all so much for joining us today. And just as a reminder, the actual hearing is tomorrow at 10 a.m., I believe, and the details of that are in the press release that was sent out. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for the opportunity to hear from this brilliant group of folks here, and hope you all have, oh, sorry, we have one last one. Who is the one person who is teaching now? Does anyone know that?
Yeah, Angela Williamson is back teaching at a small, I believe, Christian school in
private school.
Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Private school.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.